August 2000, Spider-Man was published by Activision on the Sony PlayStation 1 to critical acclaim. The N64 version was due to be released at the same time, however its developer Neversoft held back the N64 release in order to improve the game even further. Finally hitting store shelves in November of 2000, Spider-Man on the N64 was tweaked by Edge of Reality, and the extra development time has resulted in some general improvements to the game, making this the definitive version of the game to play, so let's check it out. The story in Spider-Man begins as Peter Parker witnesses a fake Spider-Man stealing a new piece of technology being unveiled. Naturally, Spidey wants to clear his name, however as you've been framed for this crime, you're also on the run from the law, giving this game an interesting plot, and this allows for many adversaries from the Spider-Man universe to come into the game. One thing which disappointed some was the removal of the FMV cutscenes which were in the PlayStation version. These were presented in between levels to drive the story, and due to limitations of the cartridge format, these had to be axed. In their place are some frame grabs from the PlayStation version, however these are presented in a comic book style with added sound effects and dialogue. Personally, I actually think this works a lot better than the full motion video. If you're a fan of comics, then this feels more authentic to the roots of Spider-Man, and just like the comics, it means you will use your imagination to play the game. Now graphically, the game will also divide opinion. If you're a PlayStation fan, then you'll most likely prefer the sharper, jagged edges of that version. However, I prefer the softer, more rounded look of the N64 game. The graphics are also enhanced with the help of the expansion pack, which adds more detail to the levels, and it also keeps the frame rate up during some of the more intense fights. Some of the open world cityscape areas do have a little too much fogging for my liking, and they tend to look very similar. It would have been near impossible for the N64 to handle a full city for you to explore, so this is the next best compromise. When you are in the indoor area levels, I really like the textures and level design, and as you progress through the game you'll enter some quite honestly fantastic looking areas. Now speaking of the fighting mechanics, I think Spider-Man is one of the few games to really nail it. Like many games, it will take some getting used to the N64 controller, as the button layout is not well suited to it. After some practice in the training mode, it'll start to feel comfortable, and you'll soon be swinging from building to building and taking on multiple enemies in no time at all. Spider-Man feels agile, nimble and quick, just like you'd want and expect him to. It wouldn't be a Spider-Man game without a few cool tricks up his sleeve to help you in your quest. Spider-Man has the ability to shoot webs at his opponent, which comes in handy as it gives you the ability to tie up enemies from the distance and run past them quickly. Or when faced with multiple enemies, you can sling your web at one to give yourself time to take down some of the others. Spidey also has the ability to pretty much stick to any surface in the game, whether it be the side of a building you want to climb up, or crawling along the side of a hallway to avoid enemies. You can also quickly launch yourself onto the ceiling to either avoid enemies, or at some stages in the game to find hidden routes or areas. This adds a sense of exploration to the game and gives you total 3D control to decide how you want to tackle the situation. It is a nice touch as some may prefer the brawler approach and may want to take all comers head on. However, many of us prefer the stealth approach and prefer to sneak over and past enemies to avoid confrontation. The game mechanics allow you to play the game how you want to, and this adds longevity to the game as it's fun to go back and try different styles in certain areas. There are times however the controls really let the game down. Having a single button to control Spidey's web attacks means that pulling off some of the abilities is tedious, and you'll often find yourself performing the wrong web attack you planned. The camera is also an issue as it doesn't seem quite quick enough to react to your environment and can occasionally get stuck. Like Zelda, this does have the option to center the camera with the Z button, however there are some small areas such as the boss battles where there just isn't enough room. Also pressing the Z button to center the camera is an issue, as when there are enemies on screen at the same time, this is the button you use to lock onto them. The AI is also a mixed bag. There are occasions when enemies will seem completely oblivious to your presence despite being right next to them. Other times enemies will just swarm at you in a group. I would have liked to have seen more depth in their thought process, such as taking cover behind objects or running away, but personally I think that would have slowed the game down too much. After all, this is an action game. The audio in the game is however pretty much perfect. The game has a dynamic soundtrack like you would have experienced in games like Banjo-Kazooie. The music will tail off in areas of little action, but as soon as enemies start to attack it picks up into a faster paced medley. Adding to the game's comic book presentation, there are also level intro voiceovers by none other than Stan Lee. His delivery is fantastic and at times humorous. His voice adds credibility to the game, and when combined with the excellent sound effects, it really heightens the production values. There are also a nice selection of secrets to unlock in the game. There are a full range of comic book covers to get, and also each of the levels has its own unique cover artwork, which any Spider-Man fan will enjoy. You also have the ability to unlock many different costumes for Spider-Man, taking in the many different iterations of the character throughout the years. That being said, the game is far too easy at times. Any competent gamer should be able to complete this in a day, even on the higher difficulties. This is a shame as the game is very enjoyable to play, but it's over far too soon, and without a multiplayer mode the only reason to go back is to try and unlock everything. Spider-Man has over 30 levels, a training mode, tons of unlockables, and absolutely fantastic presentation and production qualities. Aside from the loss of the full motion video, the game still manages to be one of the most fun games to experience on the N64. By today's open world adventures, it may not hold up, but for its time it was something incredible, and it was perhaps the first Spider-Man game that really gave you that sense of freedom you associate with the character. So how do you remember Spider-Man? Did you prefer the N64 version for its more authentic presentation, or did you prefer the PlayStation's more cinematic feel? This was a North American exclusive title, so do you feel you missed out on the game if it wasn't released where you are? As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time.